Boundaries are probably one of, if not the most crucial things that you can do for your mental and emotional well being. And that's exactly why I want to talk about them with you right here, right now, today for this week's training. Hey, what's up? I am evidence based life coach Johnna Renée, here to teach you all of the ish that I wish someone would have taught me about self discovery, self acceptance, and self-love so that you can live that hashtag best life that you see everyone talking about. So that's exactly what we're going to do today. I'm going to be telling you some ish that I wish someone told me about boundaries. And I'm going to do this with the disclaimer that this is a really broad topic, right? Like, there are so many different things that I could say about boundaries. And so my intention for today is to give you a Cliff Notes version of what I think that the need to knows are, so that as you move through your life, as you move through your relationships, you might, and will come across the situation where you're like, oh, this is an opportunity to practice what Jonna told me, right? So that this can actually be applied in real time, and this isn't something where you have to sit there and think, like where can I do this? Like, how can I use this? And so I don't want to flood you with like too much, like too specific, but I do want to give you some key things that I feel everybody should know about boundaries. And so let's start with the four main problems. So the four main problems I see with boundaries, whether that be with my clients, with my friends, with anyone, is number one, people don't know what they are. They have a misconception about what a boundary actually is. Two, if you then know what a boundary is, then you don't know how to create ones that serve you. Three, if you know what a boundary is, you know what boundaries will serve you, then you don't actually know how to enforce them. And four, if you've done all that other stuff, you know what the boundary is, you know which ones you need to serve you, and you actually enforce them, people aren't prepared for what happens when they actually do. And that is an ish that no one tells you, right? Because whenever you have and start to enforce boundaries and you haven't done it before, people are going to feel some kind of way. People are going to feel some kind of way. And so it is important that you know what you need to do in order to navigate that. So let's kick it off with the first problem, and that is that people don't know what boundaries are. So what are boundaries? So I like to think of boundaries as little bodyguards for your personal, emotional, and um, mental well-being, and also sometimes your physical safety. So I think a lot of times boundaries get a bad rap because it's like, yeah, like I need them, but it's like hard line in the sand. Like, this is, my way or the highway. And, you have to do what I say. Like, this is my boundary. This is my non-negotiable. This is something that, is difficult for me to talk about because this might be taken from the recipient or taken by the recipient as something that is, a hard, again, line in the sand that, it's something that we can't talk about. It's just like, it's what I say, the end, period. And I think that a better way to consider what boundaries are, like the little bodyguards, right? And if you think about, your bodyguards, like, it's not like other people can't talk to you. It's not like, you can't like bend the rules every now and then. Each situation, and again, this is like how it's boundaries are so nuanced. Each situation is unique and specific, and they are something that I want to invite you to consider them as more of a guidebook and like a user manual for the dynamic you want to create in relation with others and also in the relation with yourself. Um, and so it's really something that we need in order to help others, because clear is kind, right? So if you know your boundaries, if you can clearly communicate those in a way that doesn't say like my way or the highway, then it helps the other person to understand you, why these boundaries are important to you, and how to interact with you. And so it's something that can really be like comforting and beneficial, and not something that is like scary and to be avoided. I also want to touch on, while we're on the topic, what boundaries are not. And so boundaries are not statements, first of all, right? They are not things that are like, I don't put up with lying. Lack of integrity is a deal breaker for me. These statements are essentially non-agreements, right? And they basically say without saying to the other person, F around and find out. This is what I, this is what I don't do. This is what I do. And, if you want to try me, come at me. That's basically what that says, right? Like, it's not collaborative. It's not understanding. It's just like, again, my way or the highway. A boundary is also not a request. It's not like, please be honest with me. Please be in integrity with your word. This is like asking someone to be a certain way, right? Like, this is asking someone to be a certain way so that they can be in relation with you. And that applies pressure, right? Like, that may be a boundary of yours, and that's cool. Like, you want someone who's honest, you want someone who's in integrity. And at the same time, that applies pressure to this person, because they're like, oh, well, this person is expecting this from me. This person is, looking to me and like asking me to do this thing when I'm just trying to live my life. And while the recipient may be honest and they may be a person of integrity, whenever you put your boundary in that type of wrapping paper, when you frame it in that kind of a way, it's something where it's like, you're asking the other person for something before you've ever like given them anything, kind of a thing. That's not always necessarily true, but like, see what I'm saying? If you're like, please do this, like you're asking them, like you're begging them, you are in a position where you're asking them again to be some kind of way, when most of us just want to be ourselves. Like, it applies that pressure once again. Another thing that boundaries are not, they're not an ultimatum. They're not a threat, right? What I mean by that is, whenever people say, if you do X, then I'm going to Y. If you lie to me, then I'm gone. If you don't do what you say you're going to do, then this is a done deal. And these kinds of things, again, very much put the recipient on the defense, because they are like, well, shit, like, I can't even be authentic with myself or with this person, because what if I accidentally slip up and I'm not in integrity with my word? What if I accidentally forget to share detail about, the story, and they find out that I didn't share that detail, and they see that as lying and being dishonest, right? So it's something where this, puts the pressure and puts the threat on the experience. And so the recipient is in a place where they feel like they're kind of walking on eggshells, right? Because they're like, well, if I do this thing, they told me that this other thing's going to happen. And that doesn't create the space for someone to feel safe, right? That doesn't create the space for someone to feel like they're understood, or like they can be themselves. Because if they do one of these things that are out of alignment, that are against, in contrast to what you said, then it's a position where they're like, well, this person's going to reject me, right? Like, you're guaranteeing rejection if they do these like things, if you're setting these terms and conditions, right? And so a better way to phrase this type of a value, whenever you were talking in terms of honesty and integrity, those are two of my core values, my two core values. So that's why I'm using them as our examples for today. But a way to frame that in that wrapping paper that creates a more collaborative space, a safer opportunity for someone to engage, would to be, framing it, packaging it in a way that sounds something like this. Hey, honesty and integrity are really important to me, and I would like to take a moment to talk about why they're so important, and also to set some standards around both and like what that looks like for me. And what this does is this explains your why, right? It like lets the person know why this is so important to you. You are inviting someone into the conversation. You're saying like, hey, like, I want to share this with you. Like, I want to be vulnerable. I want to, help you better understand me. And also I want to set some standards, which invites the other person into the process, right? And so that they feel that it's a more collaborative experience, that they feel that it's a more of a conversation of, hey, like, let's talk about this, instead of like, I'm going to tell you this kind of a thing. See the difference? So those are what boundaries are and what boundaries are not, which again is the first problem that I feel everyone, I mean, not everyone, but like so many people have when it comes to boundaries, is knowing like what they are, and also a way that you can reframe the thing that you were saying that you want to have a conversation about in that boundary. So that's a little bonus for you there. So the second problem, let's go into that people don't know how to create boundaries that serve them. So just because, let's say I have a time boundary on Sundays where I'm like, hey, this is like my time, like I don't make any plans necessarily. And that really serves me. Like that's a boundary of mine. And it's not to say that that's like a hard line in the sand. It's just kind of something that I'm like, yeah, like I spend Sundays to myself. Let's also keep in mind I'm an introvert. Let's also keep in mind I do a lot of very intensive, like emotionally heavy kind of work throughout the week. And so having that Sunday time to just sort of be really serves me. Might not serve an extrovert who works at home all the time. See what I'm saying? Like someone who is extroverted and needs that community and needs that contact with people and needs that extra type of experience and communication and connection with people, then but they don't get it, so like that wouldn't serve them, right? So it's not that like the boundaries that serve one person are always going to serve someone else. And so it's really important that you take the time to understand what gives you energy, what drains you, so that you can kind of see, hey, like maybe I need a boundary there. The things that you are doing that you find just exhausting, you probably need a boundary around that. And that might not be the same as it is for me. That might not be the same as it is for, your friend. Like it's going to look different for everyone. And so that's part of what you need to do in order to understand like what is a boundary that I need, like where do I need these boundaries? So let's say that you understand what they are, you know where you need them, and let's say that like you've got them. You're like, yep, this is the boundary. Like let's say, like let's take it to my time example again. Sundays, I like to do nothing. Like that's my time to recharge and to be alone. But someone asks me to, help them move, let's say. If I don't enforce that boundary, right? If I'm like, oh yeah, sure, then what can happen is I might start to resent the person who asked me to ask me to help them move, because if I agree to do it when Sundays are usually my day to not do anything, then it can very quickly be a situation where I feel depleted, where as I'm moving through the week, I just don't feel like myself. I don't have quite the energy. Like I observe the difference. Like I just feel kind of off. And when I finally think, oh, well, it could be because I helped such and such move on Sunday, then you can really start to resent that person, right? Like that's to circle back and like how make that connection there. And so if you don't enforce the boundaries that you set, then it can be a situation where you too are in this space that's like, I've got these things, but they're not really working because you're not enforcing them, right? So that is the third problem that we see when it comes to boundaries. And then the fourth one is that when you do enforce the boundaries, when you do say, hey, yeah, I'm not able to help you move, if you've never enforced a boundary before, people are going to feel some kind of way. That person might be like, oh, well, did they not like me? Like, is Johnna mad at me? Oh, well, is she, like, what's her problem? Why does she not want to help? Like, it can be something where people really feel some kind of a way. And so it's important that you know that that can happen, first of all, and then secondly, how to navigate it. And so a way that, to take it back to this moving and my Sunday example, a way to navigate that might be like, hey, I would really love to help you move, but I've had a really long week and Sundays are really my personal time. And I'm just not going to be able to, like, I really apologize, like help the person understand. Most of the time, whenever you explain it to people and whenever they understand where you're coming from, they're not going to be like, oh, well, like, F that person. They're going to be like, oh, thank you for telling me. Thank you for your vulnerability. Thank you for your transparency. And when you do that, here is the beautiful thing, you are showing them how it's done. You are setting the standard to be transparent and to be vulnerable. You are modeling the behavior. You are helping them to be more vulnerable and transparent within their own lives and their own communication, simply because you showed them the example of how to do it within your own, right? And it feels good. It feels good whenever you are transparent with people, whenever you are honest with them, whenever you are vulnerable, as long as it feels safe. It oftentimes feels good because you're not like, well, like they don't know, like maybe I didn't tell them, like maybe they feel some kind of way. It's a situation where it feels good because you're like, well, I told them, I did all I could. I really helped, or I really tried to express my point, why it's important to me. And, that feels good knowing that I showed up and I did what I could to support them and explain like how me not helping them move is actually really supporting me. And so, yeah, it's a beautiful thing. I want to also talk about how we do it, right? So I've talked about the 4 problems. People don't know what boundaries are. People then don't know how to create boundaries that serve them. People then don't know how to enforce the boundaries. And when they do, they don't know what to expect. And so if you are in the position where you have, checked off all those boxes, like you're good, like you're ready, you're like, let's create some boundaries, then how do you actually do it? So the first thing is that you need to, like I mentioned earlier, get clear about where you need the boundary. And so again, like I mentioned, looking at things that really drain you, that really make you feel upset or in a lowered state, whether that be agitation, frustration, anger, whatever the case may be, even sadness sometimes, if there's like an extreme like situation, or not even extreme, but if there's just a situation where, like, let's say a loved one is like always telling you about like all the sad things that are happening and you're just like, hey, I've got my own stuff going on. A boundary might be saying something like, you know I really feel for you, and I would love to support you, and at the same time right now I don't know that I can because I've got a lot of my own stuff going on, so I'm going to take some time to myself, kind of a thing. I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, go see a therapist, shut down social media, whatever the case may be. And, that might be what the boundary is that serves you, right? Like, but again, getting clear about where you need the boundary by looking at what things drain you or make you feel some type of way that you don't want to feel, right? So that's step one. The next step is to look at what boundaries would serve you. Would it be turning off social media? Would it be having a day alone? Like, what is the thing that would serve you, right? And so then from there, you can kind of start to create that boundary. Well, okay, on Sundays, I'm on alone time. Okay, well, I'm going to not engage in social media for a week. Like, what's going to serve you? And then from there, you actually have to enforce it, right? Because if I say, hey, Sundays are me time, but then I'm always doing stuff with other people, that's not enforcing the boundary. If you say, I'm going to take a break from social media, but you're still scrolling every night, that's not enforcing a boundary. If you say to someone, hey, I'm not comfortable having this conversation, excuse me, but then you continue to engage in the conversation topic that they're talking about, it's not enforcing a boundary. And so you have to know when and where and how to enforce it. And again, what to expect when you do. And then, of course, lastly, I suggest this with everything: reflect and assess, because the boundaries that serve you today might not be the boundaries that serve you tomorrow. Like, they're not written in stone and chiseled somewhere. They are flexible. They're yours. You get to decide, when and where to apply them, and when to kind of, like, flex it a little bit, when to kind of like, give it a little zhuzh. And so take the time to consider, like, hey, I was in a position where every Sunday I took time alone to myself. I shut down my phone. I, did my own thing. I like to call it hermiting. And now that I'm in a place where I'm, hypothetically speaking, now that I'm in a place where I, am not doing as much stuff with other people, like now, like, let's say, like, I'm doing more work from home, maybe it would be something where I want to open that up to like family dinners on Sunday nights, right? Like, maybe what served you previously is not going to serve you now. So that's just an example, but know that you can shift that boundary, you can make that change and really actually take intentional time to like reflect and assess if that boundary is still serving you. So it's not necessarily something you have to like write on your calendar, but it is something where I would say, like, if it's a consistent boundary, if it's like you shut down social media for a week, then at the end of that week, make a note in your calendar, jot it on a sticky note, and maybe say, like, hey, in this situation, did this serve me? If it's something where, you don't necessarily have to do that, but if it's a boundary that's an ongoing one, then just, being mindful to maybe check in with yourself and see if this is still serving you after you've been doing it for a little while. So that is what I have for you for this week's training. Again, this was a Cliff Notes version. And if this was helpful, then you definitely want to tune in to Friday's episode of Ish I Wish Someone Told Me, Boundaries, the Basics, where therapeutic coach Shannon and I are going to be talking about what I have talked with about you, or what I've talked to you about. Oh, wow, it was so hard to say today. We're going to be going into that and having a conversation and providing an educational training on that on Friday at 12 p.m. Eastern, Friday, June 10th, 12 p.m. Eastern. I'm failing the English language right now. Over on Instagram. I will link my Instagram below if you would like to join. If you have anything that you would like for us to discuss that I didn't touch on today, go ahead and comment that below, and so that we can make sure to address it, because we do convert the actual lives into podcasts later. And if you want to listen to some of the previous episodes, I will also link those below. And if you're struggling with boundaries, another cool thing that we're going to be doing on Friday is announcing a free opportunity that will serve you in creating those healthy boundaries that serve you, actually enforcing them, and how to navigate them in real time from support with me and Shannon, that we're going to be announcing on the live on Friday. And so again, make sure that you are there for that. And if you can't be, I totally get it. Let me know and I will make sure to get you the details. So that's what I have for you. Thank you for watching. Share this with someone that needs help and support around understanding what boundaries are and knowing, how to navigate them. That would really benefit from watching this Cliff Notes version on boundaries. And I will see you soon. Have a great day.